Okay, so let's continue our discussion about the data analysis in quantitative research. So we are still in quantitative research. We are not yet done. Remember that we have a lot of statistical tools or statistical tests na pwedeng gamitin in analyzing our data. So let's have a little review about the two types of tests na we can do sa ato ang quantitative data. We have the parametric and the non-parametric test. So do not forget that when you say parametric test, we use this if we have like specific assumptions about the characteristics of our population. And if ever we don't have a specific assumption about our population at the same time, we don't have non-metric independent variables, then we will be doing non-parametric test. But to really decide what type of test we are going to use, ang pinaka ginatanaw jud nato is the distribution of our sample. Kasi remember our lesson about the normal distribution, the skewed one, positively and negatively skewed one. Sa statistics, para ma-consider nato na parametric test ang ato ang gamiton in analyzing, we have to make sure that our data is normally distributed. So if you can still remember the graph, the histogram, dapat you will get a bell shape. Though actually that is not really very strict. As long as kung dili nato makita na normally distributed atong data, actually we will be dependent on the sample size. So as long as we have a lot of na sample size, though we cannot assure the normal distribution, pwede siya actually i-test sa parametric test. So, ang parametric tests kasi natin will give reliable results even if we cannot assure the normal distribution of our data as long as we have a considerable amount of sample. Sa non-parametric test kasi, this is arbitrary. We don't really look at the normal distribution of data, and at the same time, if we have very minimum amount of sample size, then that's the time we use the non-parametric test. However, in research kasi, most statisticians and ang gina-consider na reliable ang parametric test. So, what type of measurement level is applicable ang mga test na ito if our data is either interval or ratio? So we are done having our review with this one. Pag interval or ratio ang data natin, then most likely we will be using parametric test. But if our data are nominal or ordinal, so when you say nominal, categorical lang siya, or ordinal, there is ranking, then that's the time we use the non-parametric test. However, let me remind you, if you have like questionnaire and then your questionnaire uses a Likert scale, but when you analyze your data, you have computed for the mean, meaning lahat ng mga sagot ng mga participants, kinuha mo yung mean ng mean nila. If ganun yung nangyari class, mahulog na siya sa interval na type of data pag kinuha ang mean. Pero pag ang i-process natin is the answers jud sa mga participants na nominal, like 2, 3, 4, 5, and then wala ta nagkuha og mean, diri jud siya padulong sa non-parametric test. So, sa parametric test, we are actually using the mean kasi. But sa non-parametric test, since the mean cannot be a representative of the sample na gikuha natin, then we will be using the median. So, mani akong gingon kagaina na when you say parametric test, you have information about your population, but you just get samples out from your population. Sa non-parametric test, there is an availability of information about your population. And for applicability, parametric test, yung mga variables natin, yun yung mga applicable na pwedeng i-test using the parametric test. But sa non-parametric test, even the attributes can be tested. So mga attributes like we cannot measure really in numerical na value. So one example lang, like if you have excuse me, questions, a statement of the problem ninyo na is there a significant relationship, if na okay yung yung ating requirement for parametric test, then we will be using the Pearson moment correlation. But if hindi pumasa sa mga requirements sa parametric test yung ating data, then that's the time we use a non-parametric test called Spearman. Okay? Questions? Questions so far? Okay. Wala. So, since quantitative research ni, then we will have hypothesis testing class. So, ang mga walay hypothesis atong mga qualitative research. So, ito yung mga examples ng mga parametric and non-parametric test na pwede nating gawin. So for example, nag-hypothesis testing ta regarding the difference between one or two groups. So sa parametric test, if you only have one sample, like one group lang dyan ang imuhang test, either we use the t-test or the z-test. But looking at your studies, wala man ta din study nga isa ka grupo lang yun. I mean, kung positive group lang tanan, wala man ko kakita og ingana nga study so far. So most likely diri ta mahulog sa two samples. So look at your statement of the problem. If you have question like, is there a significant difference? Tapos duha ka grupo, no? Then dirita, either independent or paired samples. So pag independent samples class, you have different groups. I mean, you have two groups. They are different from each other. They are independent from each other. Meaning ana ang imuhang sample nga gitest sa isa ka grupo kay lahi nga mga samples or like lahi na mga ilaga, for example, and then ang sa PICAS group lahi sad na ilaga. So mo na siyang ginaingon nga independent sample. Parehas anang positive control ug ang inyuhang treatment group. So actually if sa treatment group lahi nga ilaga tapos sa lahi nga group positive control group lahi pud na ilaga, independent samples na sila. So it's either we use the t-test, the two-group t-test or kanang student t-test nato nga ginatawag, or we can use the z-test. So later we will differentiate the z-test and the t-test. Kasi most of the time, pag mga ingana ng mga question, ang ginagamit nato t-test. Now, pag paired ang inyuhang sample, when I say paired sample, you have groups, you have two groups, but related sila with each other, dependent sila with each other. Unsa ako ang ginamin ana? For example, you have one group sa ilaga, no? Tapos at gitagaan nimo sila og drug, and then after 1 hour, gi-check nimo, like for example ang iyahang blood sugar level. And then after 24 hours, nag-test na pud ka. Now, if you want to see if there is a significant difference between the first hour and the 24 hours, 24th na hour we will be using the paired t-test. Kasi isang sample lang yun, isang subject lang ang binigyan ng intervention. Gusto lang nato mabalaan kung naabay difference between the first na pag-test and the next phase. So like sa 24 hours. Una siya ang kalahian sa paired na t-test and sa student t-test or the two-group t-test. Okay? Questions so far? please look at your statement of the problem and analyze kung tama ba nga t-test ang inyuhang gamito. Na kung t-test, unsang klaseng t-test? Independent samples ba or paired sample na t-test? Okay, next we have, kaya ang ato ang midterm ani ang mostly sa akong mga questions will be more on the data analysis. So you have to really know your statement of the problem, and then I'll be asking you one by one sa unsang klaseng data analysis ang gamiton. So kung quantitative research, I'll be expecting you to answer statistical measures, while those for qualitative research, naapod mo yung sarili ninyong data analysis. So di man pwede nga you have your data and then we will not analyze it. So for non-parametric test class, we have like one sample gihapon. So we can use the following, the chi-square. Though the chi-square dyan ang pinaka-ginagamit, we are not really that familiar with the other three. Kasi chi-square, even sa two samples, pag independent samples gani, we always use the chi-square. So pag dili jud na applicable si t-test, then let's shift to chi-square. And then we have the Mann-Whitney. And for paired samples, we have the following. So Sine, Wilcoxon, McNemar, and chi-square. But before nato na sila isa-isahon diri sa ta, this is just the difference between the z-test and the t-test. So it is actually dependent if you know the standard deviation of the population. So if yes, you know the standard deviation of the population, not just the sample alone, but the whole population. So if yes, you have to look at the sample size. If it's above 30, then you use the z-test. Kung daghan kaayo, z-test ta. Pero if it's below 30, then you use the t-test. So ang t-test is applicable to samples na medyo gamay lang, no? But if you don't know the population or standard deviation ng population, automatic class, we will be using the t-test. So that is the reason why I told you that z-test is not really that commonly used in statistics. Instead, we always use the t-test because most of the time we actually don't know the population standard deviation. So t-test jud ta. And then sa inyong statistics, I have presented this flow chart na gamiton nato in deciding what type of statistical test are we going to use. So sa flow chart, you have their parametric assumptions. Kani ang mga requirement nato para makaingon ta na parametric test ang atuang gamiton. So number 1, we have samples that are independent and unbiased. And number 2, kailangan normally distributed ang ato ang data. So actually, even if we don't know if it's really normally distributed, as long as we have considerable amount of samples, dili lang isa ka buok, dili lang duha ka buok, pwede na siya i-test sa parametric test. And at the same time, when we compute, na sila equal na variances. So as we go with our software application, I'll be teaching you how to look at your data if it's normally distributed or not. So the first thing to do is to really ask what type of data do you have before deciding what statistical tool are you going to use. So for example, your type of data is continuous. Continuous is the other term for interval data. Okay, interval data. Interval and ratio data will be here. And the discrete or categorical data, like we have nominal and ordinal data, diri siya sa pika sa right side. So if you look at your data and it's nominal or it's ordinal, then you may use the chi-square test either for 1 and 2 samples. So that's automatic if it's nominal or ordinal. Even if it's 1 sample or 2 samples, then chi-square tayo. But if you look at your data and it's interval or ratio, then dito tayo. But the next question that we will ask, anong type of question natin sa ating SOP? Kung ang question natin is there a significant relationship? Then, dirita, going here ta. But if you look at your statement of the problem and the question is this one, is there a significant difference? Then we are like going here. So sa mga class, look at your statement of the problem. If you have question like, is there a significant difference? Dirita ha. So ang next question na inyong pangutanon, do you have a true independent variable? So naabatan na to, naabatay independent variable din ha sa inyong conceptual framework. Nga tinuod ha na independent na variable. So kung yes, we will be using regression analysis, but pag walay true independent variable. Ano lang, for example, when I say wala kay true na independent variable, ang gibutang lang nimo din ha sa imong independent variable kay kanang mga what do you call that, imuhang demographic profile. So pag ingana dirita sa correlation analysis. So pag na-satisfy nato ang mga parametric assumptions, then we will be using the Pearson's R. Pero pag wala, we are here now sa Spearman's rank correlation. So next week, since it's already 8:30, mag-concentrate sa ta dinhi sa is there a significant difference? Diri sa ta mauna, medyo mas daghan siya og test. So we will concentrate sa t-test and sa ANOVA, and then based sa mga gihatag class na mga examples na ko diri, we'll be having software application. Okay, para kabalo mo mag-process sa inyong data. So dinha sa ako mag-stop for now.